Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. She arrived on Earth inside a delivery truck that smelled faintly of overripe fruit and human disappointment, which immediately lowered her expectations for the species. According to the mission briefing, this planet was emotionally volatile, biologically messy, and statistically prone to irrational behavior. According to her first sensory scan, it was also loud, sticky, and deeply committed to eating things that were objectively bad for survival. She adjusted the human-shaped shell she wore, feeling the familiar discomfort of her long ears folded beneath artificial hair, and reminded herself that she was not here to judge. She was here to observe. Observe meant watch, record, and under no circumstances interfere, even if interference seemed, from a purely logical standpoint, extremely tempting. Her internal systems hummed softly as she stepped onto the pavement, translating atmospheric data into neat streams of numbers. Gravity was acceptable. Oxygen was tolerable. Humans were already failing several unspoken tests. One of them walked directly into a pole while staring at a glowing rectangle, muttered an apology to the pole, and continued on without acknowledging the collision as a learning opportunity. She logged this under cultural anomalies, likely permanent. Her superiors would appreciate the efficiency. The assigned observation zone was a quiet neighborhood, chosen precisely because nothing important was supposed to happen there. This irritated her. She preferred significant variables. Still, orders were orders, and she was very good at following them. She took up a position near a small park, pretending to examine a public information board while actually mapping emotional fluctuations in nearby humans. The results were confusing. They laughed during stress, complained during comfort, and formed deep attachments to animals that refused to obey them. One human loudly scolded a dog, then immediately apologized to it. The dog appeared victorious. Then there was the child. He moved differently from the adults, as if the world were less solid and more negotiable. He ignored warning signs with impressive confidence and treated danger as a suggestion rather than a rule. Her probability models flagged him repeatedly, which was inefficient and mildly annoying. Children were not part of her primary data set. She attempted to exclude him from her calculations, but her systems kept returning to him, highlighting risk vectors in bright, irritating alerts. She told herself this was merely statistical curiosity. Statistics, after all, were harmless. To maintain cover, she attempted a human behavior known as blending in. This involved standing still for long periods and occasionally nodding at nothing. Unfortunately, a human mistook this for friendliness and began talking to her about the weather. She nodded more. The conversation did not end. She learned that humans discuss the atmosphere not to exchange information, but to fill silence, which she concluded was an emotional fear response. When the human finally left, satisfied, she recorded the interaction as a minor survival victory. As the sun lowered, she noticed the child again, edging closer to a place her models marked as dangerous. Her directives activated automatically, reminding her of the consequences of involvement. She complied, stepping back into observation mode, her face calm, her posture relaxed, her ears hidden, her thoughts not entirely so. Somewhere deep in her systems, an unfamiliar process ran quietly, tagging the moment as something more than data, something she would later fail to explain using numbers alone. By the third rotation of Earth's daylight cycle, she had learned that observation was far more exhausting than participation. Watching humans required constant recalibration, because none of them behaved as predicted, including the ones who claimed to have plans. She occupied a bench near the park again, feeding sensory data to her internal archive while pretending to be deeply interested in a small device she did not need. The device remained dark. She stared at it anyway. Humans respected this posture. Her superiors checked in through a tight quantum channel that vibrated unpleasantly behind her eyes. Data streams were requested. She sent them neat reports filled with graphs, emotional averages, and carefully neutral language. Nowhere did she mention the child's increasing risk index or the strange delay in her response times whenever he entered her field of view. She told herself this was professionalism. She was protecting the integrity of the study. Studies, after all, required patience. The child appeared shortly after, carrying something sticky and red that violated several health assumptions. He sat on the ground, spoke to an insect as if it were a colleague, then laughed when it ignored him. She recorded the laughter frequency and told herself she was not smiling. Her facial muscles disagreed slightly, but she corrected them. Emotional leakage was considered a malfunction. To understand humans better, she attempted deeper cultural immersion. This involved purchasing food from a small structure that advertised happiness in large letters. She ordered what the vendor recommended, which turned out to be fried, sweet, and aggressively unnecessary. Her internal diagnostics protested. She ate it anyway. The sensation was alarming, then confusing, then oddly pleasant. She logged this under dangerous pleasures and decided never to report it. The child noticed her soon after. He waved, she froze. Humans waving expected responses. She attempted several options internally, selected one at random and waved back too slowly. The child seemed satisfied. He approached, studied her ears through her hair with open curiosity, and asked if she was from around here. She said yes, because the alternative explanation involved stellar cartography and would require diagrams. He accepted this without suspicion, which disturbed her. He talked, a lot, about nothing, about everything. She learned his name, his favorite color, and the fact that he believed adults were mostly guessing. This aligned with her data. When he asked what she did, she said she watched things. He nodded solemnly and said that was important work. This caused another internal system hiccup she could not immediately diagnose. Alerts flickered quietly at the edge of her awareness. Risk probability increased. Environmental hazards aligned. She repositioned herself by a few steps, purely coincidentally placing her body between the child and danger. This was not interference, she reasoned. It was geometry. As dusk approached, her superiors sent a warning pulse. Deviations were being noticed. She acknowledged it, straight-backed and compliant, while the child tugged on her sleeve to show her something deeply unimportant and completely urgent. She looked down at him, at the unmeasured variables, the laughter, the chaos, and realized with mild alarm that observation was no longer the only process running inside her. The moment did not announce itself as important. It arrived disguised as ordinary human chaos, which was how most disasters seemed to prefer to travel. The child had discovered wheels, height, and confidence in equal measure, and was now combining them in a way her probability models found deeply offensive. He balanced at the top of a sloping structure clearly designed by someone who believed warning signs were a substitute for safety. She stood several steps away, posture neutral, eyes forward, running calculations so fast they blurred into instinct. Her internal directives rose like a polite but firm chorus. Observe. Do not intervene. Intervention alters outcomes. Altered outcomes invalidate the study. The study matters. The universe apparently depended on her restraint. She agreed with all of this right up until the numbers stopped behaving. Risk projections spiked, then refused to settle. She recalculated. She optimized. She begged the math to calm down. It did not. The child wobbled. Time did not slow, but her perception sharpened to an uncomfortable clarity. She noted the angle of descent, the insufficient friction, the inevitable human scream that had not yet formed. A nearby adult was distracted by a glowing rectangle, engaged in what humans called just a second, which never meant 1 second. Her systems flagged a point of no return. She stepped forward, then stopped herself, then stepped forward again, annoyed at the inefficiency of hesitation. The child slipped. Her body moved before her mind finished arguing. It was not dramatic. There was no flash of light, No obvious display of alien capability. She simply appeared where she should not have been, arms closing around small, warm mass, adjusting gravity by a fraction so subtle it registered as luck. They landed awkwardly but safely. The child laughed because humans often laughed when they survived things they should not have. She did not laugh. Her heart, an organ she rarely paid attention to, was doing something unprofessional. She scanned herself rapidly. No exposure. No witnesses paying the correct kind of attention. The distracted adult looked up just in time to see a woman helping a child to his feet. Relief registered. Gratitude followed. The adult thanked her. She nodded because nodding was still her strongest social skill. The child looked up at her, eyes bright, entirely unconcerned with mortality. "That was awesome," he said. She considered several responses, discarded all of them and settled on, "Please do not do that again." He grinned, "I probably will." She almost smiled. Almost. Inside her mind, alarms finally began to scream. Protocol breach. Data contamination. Consequences pending. She acknowledged them distantly, too busy replaying the moment where she had chosen wrong according to every rule she knew and right according to something new and unnamed. The child ran off, unharmed, already forgetting how close the universe had come to correcting him. She remained standing there, hands trembling just enough to notice, ears itching beneath their disguise, wondering when observation had turned into protection, and when exactly she had decided that the rules were negotiable. After the incident, Earth behaved as if nothing remarkable had happened, which she found deeply suspicious. The park remained a park. Gravity continued to function. Humans resumed their habit of almost hurting themselves and calling it normal. Only her internal systems refused to return to baseline. They replayed the moment again and again, not as data, but as something closer to memory, which was not supposed to feel warm and loud at the same time. Her superiors did not appreciate this development. A compressed transmission arrived while she was pretending to examine fruit at a market stall, its quantum signature vibrating behind her eyes like a headache with opinions. Deviations were listed, response times questioned, probability smoothing demanded. She sent back acknowledgments filled with respectful phrasing and beautifully useless statistics. If deception were an art, she suspected humans had invented it, but she was learning quickly. The child found her anyway. He always did. He appeared at her side holding a snack of unknown origin and offered her half of it with the generosity of someone who had never paid for food. She declined, citing internal restrictions. He ate it himself and declared it still good, which did not align with her scan results. He began walking, assuming she would follow. She did. This was becoming a pattern. He asked why she was always around. She told him she liked watching things happen. He considered this, then said she was bad at hiding it. He pointed out that she stood too still and listened too carefully. She adjusted her posture by 3 millimeters. He nodded, satisfied. Humans were alarmingly perceptive when they wanted to be and completely blind when it mattered. They sat on a low wall while she monitored incoming signals from orbit, carefully masking her location. The child swung his legs and asked if she was a superhero. She said no. He asked if she was a spy. She said not exactly. He asked if she was weird. She paused, then said yes. This answer pleased him the most. Humor arrived unexpectedly, as it often did. When she attempted to explain safety protocols using precise risk percentages, he laughed so hard he nearly fell off the wall. When she warned him that running blindly was statistically unwise, he asked if statistics could chase him. She admitted they could not. He ran anyway. She sighed, an affectation she had learned recently and was using too often. Above them, unseen, alien instruments recalibrated, narrowing their focus. Below, the child talked about school, unfair rules, and how adults pretended to know things. She listened, dividing her attention between cosmic threat analysis and the urgent importance of a story about a broken pencil. Strangely, both demanded equal focus. When dusk settled, she realized she had failed to send a scheduled report. This was unacceptable. She should have felt fear. Instead, she felt irritation, at the timing, at the universe, at the way concern for one small human was interfering with interstellar duty. As the child waved goodbye and reminded her not to disappear, she understood that observation had already collapsed into attachment. Far above Earth, her superiors prepared corrective measures. On the ground, she walked home under borrowed stars, long ears aching beneath false skin, wondering how something so small could disrupt something so vast, and why the thought made her almost laugh. By the time corrective measures escalated from theoretical to personal, she had already learned how to tie a child's shoelaces incorrectly 3 different ways. This bothered her less than it should have. The child did not seem to mind. He declared her version creative and ran off anyway, leaving gravity and probability to negotiate behind him. She watched, recalculating danger zones, quietly repositioning herself in the park like a misplaced statue that stubbornly refused to stay misplaced. Her internal warning systems grew less polite. Signals arrived in tighter intervals, sharper tones, less room for interpretation. Observation integrity was compromised, emotional contamination suspected, immediate compliance expected. She acknowledged every message with flawless discipline while actively ignoring their implications. Multitasking, she had discovered, was not a human weakness, it was a necessity. The child began bringing her gifts. A smooth stone, a bent coin, a leaf shaped like a spaceship. She accepted them all with solemn care, storing them in a compartment designed for memory crystals and classified data. The compartment did not complain. She suspected it was adapting. When she explained, very seriously, that stones were not approved communication tools, the child asked who approved things. She said important people far away. He frowned and said they sounded boring. She attempted to correct his risk-taking behavior using a structured training program disguised as a game. It involved pretending the ground was lava, mapping safe routes, and calculating escape paths. The child improved rapidly and then immediately used the skills to do something more dangerous. She logged this as educational backfire. Still, when he laughed and called her the smartest not adult, something inside her glowed inconveniently. Her disguise began to fail in small, irritating ways. The artificial skin behind her ears itched constantly, reacting to stress and prolonged exposure. Once, while adjusting it, the child caught a glimpse of the elongated curve beneath. He stared. She prepared 3 cover stories and 1 emergency relocation plan. He said, "Cool ears," and went back to drawing in the dirt. She stood very still until her systems confirmed she was still on Earth and not in a dream simulation. Humor became a coping mechanism. She found herself using it deliberately, testing phrases she had overheard. When she told the child, "That seems like a poor life choice," he laughed and asked where she learned to talk like that. She said from observing adults. He nodded sympathetically. When she warned him that climbing that high would invalidate future activities, he asked if that meant he'd miss dinner. She said yes. He climbed down immediately. Above them, alien instruments locked onto her signature. There would be no more warnings. She felt it in the tightening of space itself, in the way her internal clock began counting backward without permission. She should have left. She should have erased herself. Instead, she stayed until sunset, listening to the child explain why stars looked closer at night. As she walked him home, maintaining a careful distance that fooled no one, she realized that protection was no longer reactive. It was intentional, and somewhere between cosmic surveillance and a crooked pair of shoelaces, she accepted that the universe might have to wait its turn. The confrontation did not arrive with thunder or light. It arrived with silence so precise it felt engineered. She noticed it first in the way the air stopped carrying background noise, as if Earth itself had paused to listen. Her internal sensors confirmed what her instincts already knew. Containment fields had been deployed, delicate enough not to alarm humans, strong enough to cage a disobedient observer. Somewhere above, unseen geometry folded and locked. She was in the park. Of course she was. The universe had a sense of irony that bordered on mockery. The child was nearby, attempting to convince a stick to become a sword. She positioned herself between him and the invisible perimeter without drawing attention, which required pretending to be very interested in clouds. This worked because humans rarely questioned cloud appreciation. A presence pressed against her mind, familiar and cold, carrying the weight of authority and disappointment. "You have deviated." She resisted the urge to respond out loud, which humans found unsettling. Instead, she opened a narrow internal channel. Clarification requested, she sent politely. She had learned that politeness irritated them more than defiance. "You interfered. You compromised the study. You exhibit attachment." She glanced at the child, who was now dueling an imaginary enemy and losing badly. Attachment, she thought, seemed an inefficient word for what she felt. Inaccurate. Lazy. She sent back a stream of data, long-term probability improvements, micro-scale interventions with macro-scale benefit, emotional intelligence emerging as a measurable force. She framed it the way they liked: outcomes, not feelings. Silence stretched, then pressure increased, retrieval was authorized, the field tightened. Her systems prepared for forced extraction, rerouting power, safeguarding memory cores. She could leave. She could comply. The rules would be restored, the universe neatly stitched back into place. Behind her, the child shouted in triumph as the stick finally obeyed him. He noticed the change before the field fully closed. He always noticed things too early. "Are you doing that statue thing again?" he asked. She turned to him, calculating risk with useless precision. "I may have to go away," she said. "For how long?" She considered the truth. "Possibly forever." He frowned, deeply offended by the concept. "That's a dumb rule." She almost laughed, almost. "I did not make it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if conspiracies listened better when whispered. "Then don't follow it." The containment field spiked. Her superiors issued a final directive: comply now. Instead, she knelt, bringing herself to the child's level, breaking about 12 protocols in one motion. She adjusted the field just enough to let his presence register inside it. This would confuse their instruments. Confusion was a weakness. She had learned that from humans. "You are statistically terrible at staying safe," she told him gently. "But you are very good at reminding others why safety matters." He grinned. "So I helped." "Yes," she said, "immeasurably." The field trembled. Somewhere above, authority faltered just for a moment. It was not enough to win, but it was enough to change the equation. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, she did not feel like an observer arguing with the universe. She felt like part of the problem. And she found that deeply satisfying. Resolution arrived the way most meaningful things on Earth did: messily, without ceremony, and slightly late. The containment field did not collapse so much as lose interest. One moment it pressed against reality with offended precision. The next it loosened, recalculated, and quietly rewrote its own purpose. Her superiors did not admit error. They never did. Instead, they transmitted a revised directive filled with elegant language about adaptive observation and long-term cultural integration. She translated this accurately as, "Stay, but make it sound like our idea." She accepted because victory did not require argument. The quantum channel closed, leaving behind a faint ache and a surprising sense of relief. Space unfolded back into its usual indifference. The park resumed its soundtrack of wind, distant traffic, and a child making explosive noises with his mouth. Earth, apparently, had decided to keep her. The child looked up at her expectantly. "So you're not disappearing?" "No," she said, "I am repositioning." He considered this. "That sounds like when my mom says she's not mad." She smiled. This time she did not correct it. Life adjusted around the new normal. She continued observing, but observation now included participation, explanation, and the occasional poorly told joke she was very proud of. Her long ears were no longer hidden all the time. The child had named them and defended them fiercely against imaginary critics. When asked where she came from, she said far away. Humans accepted this easily. They accepted many things easily. She had learned if you said them with confidence and brought snacks. Her reports changed. They were still precise, still filled with data, but now they included variables her species had once dismissed as noise. Loyalty, humor, irrational courage, the measurable impact of one small life on a larger system. The numbers supported her. This pleased her more than it should have. The child grew a little older, a little steadier. He still ran too fast and trusted too easily, but he checked traffic now, sometimes. She taught him how to look at the stars without needing to name them, how to ask questions without expecting answers, how to stand between something fragile and something dangerous without needing a reason. He taught her how to laugh at mistakes and why rules that never bent eventually broke. On a quiet evening, as lights flickered on across the neighborhood, he asked if she was still watching everything. "Yes," she said, "even when you're not supposed to." She thought of distant worlds, revised protocols, and a universe that had reluctantly learned something new. Especially then. He nodded, satisfied.